crowded as
No,
well?
sir, not yet.
Is there fear that it will be eventually, or?
Eventually it will be, yes sir, it will. I have roughly 80 inmates. Our daily population runs about 80 inmates.
Okay.
So I have bed space. We do have some inmates from Jackson County and the city of Winder and Morgan County on occasion. We have contracts with some other agencies and also the federal government and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office.
Do you think, since Athens jail is so overcrowded, they might try to send some of their inmates to your?
We've offered that. They send them to another county.
Okay.
Are there any other direct effects that you're experiencing with the budget cuts?
The budget cuts for the state are catastrophic for local law enforcement. The cuts in the crime lab mean that the crime lab cases are delayed. Cases involving DNA. I think jurors and the public expects CSI type work from. I do. I think that's where most people get their information from. It shows like CSI that you've got a 20-minute turnaround on DNA, for instance, or blood alcohol concentration on a drunk driver. Those cases are taking 8-12 weeks now. Autopsy results are taking 6 to 8 weeks now.
What's the normal turnaround for that, or before the budget cuts usually?
Well, before the current round of budget cuts, we got autopsy results the same day. We would get blood toxicology screens within a week or so. But as the budget for the crime lab has decreased, services have been cut. For instance, they no longer analyze some things they used to. They no longer provide support and programs that they used to provide, such as criminalistic support and things along those lines, which is the identification of bullets and fired casings. Those are programs that have been cut. So what we're doing is finding that not only is the crime lab reducing the number of services, the time it takes to get the services they are doing provided to local law enforcement, local prosecutors, hometown juries, families of survivors, rape victims is taking much longer.
The services that you just mentioned that they're cutting, if you need one of those services, do you just have to contract it out to a third party, or do you just...
What we've all had to do is share our expertise with other offices. Okay, there's some things I've got some people. Deputy Dale Brown works for me, does a lot of fingerprinting and things like that. We share marijuana identification services with Morgan and Greene County, for instance. We're doing a lot of our own CSI type work, but just maintaining an alternate light source, buying and maintaining an alternate light source is just for looking for prints on bodies, for instance, or traditionally non-printable surfaces, is expensive. And our budget doesn't really provide for that. So we're having to use people, other sheriff's offices, other agencies, and we're having to work together as opposed to relying on the state for what honestly should be the state's mission. Ma'am?
So is it safe to say
that's almost a how long is a piece of string question for me. I don't know if we've gone back in time. What I think we've done is the crime lab has had to make decisions based on budget of what technological services they can provide and which they will not. I'll give you an example. We had a case where multiple bloody clothing items were submitted. Several years ago, all the blood smears, all the blood stains would have been tested against both the victim and the suspect. Now they test one. They pick the one they're going to test. And the problem with that is it leaves open the possibility that we don't know we really don't know who the other blood belongs to. Which is an answer you have to have if you're going to try a case in front of a jury. So you have to resubmit that evidence. You have to resubmit a reason to have that done. The crime lab evaluates that reason. If they think it's good enough, they perform that service. If they think it's not good enough, they do not perform that service. Then you have to go to an outside lab, or the jury never hears that evidence. The prosecutor eventually has to make that decision.
So do you think that more people will be wrongly accused of crimes because of the budget cuts? Because not
only is the possibility of people being wrongly accused or convicted, I think the more likely possibility is there's not sufficient evidence to get convictions against people who ought to go to the penitentiary.
With the budget cuts, have you had to lay off employees as well?
I've
Besides
not.
just close things?
I've not. The budget cuts, my budget, actually, they've gave me, they've increased my number of employees just this past year. The budget cuts are the state budget cuts for the crime lab. I understand that there are no new hires, even if someone leaves. Vernon Keenan or John Bankhead with the GBI may be able to address that.
When you said you have to send your stuff out to third-party labs, does that come directly out of your budget?
Yes.
Okay.
And there again, that's an item we typically don't budget for.
You
There's no
mentioned
way
that the people can affect the budget cuts and get the sheriff's department. Or you mentioned that people have a lot to do with voting them in jail. What specifically can people at home do in order to allocate these monies to?
Well, if people feel there's a need for a jail, then there's a political process. You talk to your elected officials and say, I want you to build a new jail. The jail's important to me. Okay, that having a well-run, efficient, clean, effective jail speaks to how we want our community to be viewed. And it's a political process. It's not the function, the jail is brick and mortar, but there's a lot of technology that goes into modern jail design. There's a lot of architecture that goes into modern jail design. Architecture solves a lot of problems for staffing, future staffing of the jail. If you use architecture, excuse me, you can use architecture to eliminate or to help reduce the number of staffing positions you have to have.
Going back to the original, I was talking about the car accident. Do you think if she wasn't an older lady so easy to get hold of, this would be handled any differently? What do you think you'd be doing?
I couldn't speculate on what other set of circumstances may be. It's not unusual. It's not unusual, and it is in my experience, my 32 years of law enforcement experience, that this is proper to complete an investigation before you charge someone, if you're going to charge someone. This isn't unusual or bothersome to me whatsoever.
Your department has made news multiple times, making drastic moves against child molestation and sexual abuse and stuff like that. What do you feel is the next big?
Our next issue operationally for us is accreditation for the Office of the Sheriff. We're seeking statewide accreditation, which means that we'll meet a certain state-produced standards.
Mm-hmm. And what would that accreditation change for your department? What does that mean?
Well, what it'll do is it'll give us a set of standards to increase our level, not only increase our level of professionalism, but to reduce our insurance and liability costs. Accredited agencies tend to have fewer lawsuits and fewer liability issues. We're undergoing the state accreditation process now. It's about an 18-month process. All of our policy and procedures are reviewed, evidence room, inmate handling, everything we do, communications, jail, patrol, investigations, is reviewed and make sure we're in compliance with all state standards. Once we say that we are, a group of accreditation managers come in and review and make sure we have proof that we're in compliance with all state standards.
Okay.
That's the next big mission for the Sheriff's Office. What does that actually do for the Sheriff's Office? What it does is hopefully it'll increase not only our level of response to the people in our community, because we always want to try to do better. We do a good job now. We can always do better. Not only that, but hopefully it'll increase both the pay and benefits for the employees of the Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
Let's do a couple more questions.
And it would increase the pay and benefits because the state would provide those?
No, the state doesn't provide those. The state has very little funding for the Sheriff's Office. We get minuscule amount of funding from the state, usually in the form of a grant for a laser or a radar or a specific piece of equipment. We get no funding from the state. All our funding is from our local taxpayers.
So the increased pay would come from the taxpayers?
So what we would think is the reduction in insurance costs would be used to hopefully fund a higher pay for deputy sheriffs, which leads us to attract a higher caliber candidate, which is always the mission of every law enforcement agency. You want the best you can hire. Are there any other questions?
So seeing as though it sounds like you take quite a few measures to ensure the safety of your deputies when they're standing out and keeping an eye on traffic on the road, do you think if it's more of a driver error based thing, any action should be taken to try and improve driver awareness in these kind of situations?
We've taken action to improve driver awareness in the school zones. We're actually increased our patrol presence in the school zones. We're working radar and laser in the school zones. We've obviously there's been a lot of public service announcements and a lot of discussion in the county and around the schools about being aware. I've noticed in my observations of the school zones that people do seem to be driving a bit more carefully. Hopefully in memory of Deputy Gilstrap.
You said that if I'm right, the speed limit in that area was 35.
Correct.
This time, do you think that it would be